Okay, so I should be live. Let's make sure that the microphone is working. I'm not seeing the light up. So tell me if it is working. Just making sure real quick while everyone joins us. All right. I'm going to turn it up and see if it's working. Yep, it's working. All right. Awesome. So how is everybody doing tonight? It's a very cold day here. Like always, we're supposed to be down to about 0 degrees at the end of this week again. So we had a heat wave this past weekend. We got up to 30. So pretty warm for Illinois. It was very, very nice. But in Illinois, you just learn how to dress warm and in layers, especially if you dress modestly as a lady. So I have on quite a few layers right now. Leggings are a must. I found some great leggings off Amazon that feel like a hug. They're super soft and super comfy. So leggings, boots, skirt, shirt underneath, longer shirt over top, scarf. And then when you go out, of course, gloves and all that good stuff. So, yep. Hi, Melissa. How are you? Good to see you tonight. So go ahead and drop a comment if you guys are in the live chat, and we'll get started. Okay, so I'm going to link to it once I'm done with my water. But my husband preached a really good message yesterday morning, and I kind of am doing a spin-off of that. Not the same exact points, because that would be weird if I was like talking about what he preached about the whole time, but just kind of the same basic idea of this subject of just judging and being an observer. So it's on our backup channel because his main channel got a strike for something he did with Brother Paul Wittenberger about COVID land. So it got a strike, and I hope just me saying that doesn't get me a strike. But so we are on our backup channel. Give me Liberty Baptist, I believe, something like that. If you type it in, it should come up. But I will post the link for it down below. Hello, Raquel and Sarah. So it was just basically talking about being an observer and being a wise observer. And then he was basically talking about all the warnings and proverbs and ways that we're supposed to judge. And this whole subject of judging has gotten a pretty bad rap in the world. You know, you hear the famous line, anytime that you stand against sin or anything like that, people will yell, don't judge, don't judge, don't judge. And that comes from actually Matthew 7:1-3, which says, judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And with what measure ye meet, it shall be measured to you again. So that's Matthew 7:1-2. So basically it comes from that. They take the judge not, and they'll just, yell it over and over and over again. But that's not even talking about the way that they use it is not even the way that it's in context talking about. So my husband says it oftentimes like this. He said the context of those verses is, let's say someone on the way to church gets a flat tire. And when you hear about it, you instantly say, oh, they probably got a flat tire because they didn't pay their tithe. So because, you said that, you better not ever skip your tithe, because God might judge you with that same judgment. Well, you didn't pay your tithes, so now I'm going to give you a flat tire, along those lines. So that's just a silly example, but that's what he said. Be careful jumping to these super harsh judgments on people for sins that you could someday commit yourself. So, if you're going to hold other people to that high standard, you better be holding yourself to that high standard as well. And that's why you just be careful about going to the extreme and, doing things like that. So, but God, all through Proverbs, God does talk about observing and watching what happens to people. In the passage of Proverbs 7, the passage that my husband used yesterday, it was talking about Solomon is making judgment calls about a certain woman that he is observing and the fool that goes after her. And obviously that is a lot of things go into this woman, but basically she's a harlot. And, that's where even one of the terms loud and stubborn women come from. is in that passage, but that is just one of the ways to describe her. There's a lot more that goes in that package, but basically she is a harlot, and there's all these descriptions that it's talking about. But he's describing what will happen to those who go after the strange woman. And then ultimately, the fool, the man void of understanding, does go after the harlot, and talks about her ways lead to hell, and her ways are death, and all these other things. So, in that passage, Solomon is observing and he's judging. He's making a judgment call based off the way the woman's dressed, based off the way the man's acting, based off the way the woman's acting, and all these different things. So he is making a judgment call. And I believe God wrote Proverbs so that we can read Proverbs and get a lot of wisdom, pull out wisdom where we need, and then apply it to our own lives. Like my husband was talking about yesterday, they're not necessarily biblical commands, because there are some things that you have to just use discernment, because it talks about answering not a fool in one verse. The next verse talks about answering a fool. So if it's a biblical command, you can't have two things going against each other. So once again, that's where discernment and wisdom comes in. And thank you, Sarah. This is my natural curl. Most of the time when you guys see me, it is my genetically modified curls. Basically, I blow dry my hair straight and then I curl it with a curling iron. But this is just natural curl right here. I pretty much woke up. I did my hair curly yesterday for church, woke up and shook it out and pinned some up and was good to go. So, I'm knocking the microphone over. So yeah, that's my natural curl right there. The curls that God gave me. So thank you. That was nice. So I'm always reading. Personally, in my life, I've made it a practice to observe people. I'm always reading things. I'm always watching. I'm always trying to learn a better ways to do things. Maybe the way that I'm doing something isn't working, and I'm able to see that it's not working. So I look to others for guidance, as long as they are following biblical principles. And I try to model what I'm doing after what they are doing. So next week, I am going to be having on one of my favorite people in my whole life. She has agreed to come on, and I'm so happy. She actually spoke at our mother-daughter banquet that we had, and she is just one of those women that I have looked up to my entire life. When I was newly married, I believe it was either for my bridal shower. Yes, it was for my bridal shower. She gave the devotional at my bridal shower, and she had been married probably at that time, maybe 8 or 9 years. I don't know. She's a little older than me, but not a ton. And but she did have some wisdom, and obviously now she's stayed married to the same man. She's raised 5 kids. They've raised them in church, and they have all 5 of them are godly. 4 of them are married and have children and are raising their children in church. A few of them are on staff at church, at different churches. So she's done a really good job of raising her kids. So I've always really looked to her and admired her and tried to learn stuff from her. So I'm having her on next week, and we're going to just talk about raising faithful children and raising godly children. I'm super excited about it. So she's one of the people. My husband is the same way. He's had the blessing of being raised in the ministry his entire life, and he's been around families and seen what has worked and seen what has not worked. So he has been able to do that, and he is the same way. He's always, watching people, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. And I'm going to send a message really quick so I can get some moderators in the chat. Reminder. Okay. Go ahead, and I can't talk and retweet this message at the same time. So, okay, so that's sent. Hi, KJV. Okay. Hey, Amber. So I'm really, really excited about next week. So be sure that you tune in for that, because that's going to be an exciting one. But what are some things that I've observed from others and I've made judgment calls on in my own life? Now, remember, all judgment calls are not bad. The Bible tells us to be a good observer and to be a wise observer and to see the way that, people go in their life. So number one I'm going to talk about, obviously, is marriage. And this is one thing that I've watched a lot with people. I've looked at the way that they interact with each other. I have looked at successful marriages and marriages that failed. I have looked at the world's way of doing things. And I will say one of my biggest pieces of advice is don't ask advice from someone who's, one, not even married, or two, has a divorce or two under their belt. Obviously, maybe they learned something that they did wrong during that situation, but at the end of the day, they don't have a successful marriage under their belt. So successful marriages last for a lifetime. And if someone has been divorced, obviously they can be forgiven of that. I'm not just, down on people, you horrible, horrible person that have had a divorce. No, but I'm talking about you. If you want to have a successful marriage, the ones that you need to look to for guidance are the ones who are in successful marriages and who have been in lasting marriages. So, hey, Amanda. Hey, Jenny. One thing I've noticed, I've made a judgment call on, is that the world's way doesn't work. If you look at celebrities, it's very, very rare to find a celebrity that's been married for very long, that has made their marriage work their entire lives. It's incredibly rare. Most celebrities, a lot of them don't even get married. They just shack up. And the ones that do, it's divorce and then remarriage and then divorce and remarriage. So one thing I've also noticed is that the grass is not greener on the other side of the fence. In fact, I have had acquaintances who have been divorced and remarried tell me that they would have never gotten divorced if they knew then what they knew now. And that is that the grass is not greener on the other side. I'm going to let you ladies know that men, women were different, were unique, but women have a lot of the same similar traits and men have a lot of the same similar traits. So I'm not talking about being married to someone who's a violent abuser. Okay, just get that off the table. That's not what I'm talking about. Obviously, I always have to throw this disclaimer in there. If you are married to someone who is a violent abuser who can harm you or your children, you need to get to a safe place and you need to separate yourself from him for the protection, especially of your children. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a man that is overall a good man. But most Christian men want to be good men and they want to be strong leaders and they want to guide the home and they want to do what's right. I'm talking about men like that. So most men overall, I have found, if you are happy and you have a happy home and you provide for his basic needs, he's going to be happy and he's going to make you happy. So that is kind of what I have seen, throughout my life as I've observed people. And the ones that I've talked to that have been divorced, I also pick their brains and I say, what could you have done differently? What did you do that was, because divorce takes two people. So what did you do that brought about, what was your part in it? What do you think his part in it was in it? And the ones that I've talked to, they've accepted responsibility for the part that they played in it. And they've told me, you see all of these, what look like perfect marriages, and you think, why isn't mine like that? And then you end up getting divorced and you marry someone who you think it's going to be that way, and you find out it's not. It's just like my first marriage. It takes work and it takes patience. And, every marriage has its cracks and every marriage takes work. And that's what I've been told from the ones who have been divorced and remarried. They've told me that. And they said, if I knew now what I knew then, I would have just made it work the first time around. So, and I've talked to a lot of people on this subject. So, I'm sorry, Sarah. What about men that continually have emotional affairs? That's a tough one because I've never dealt with that. So I don't know what I would do in that situation. It would be very detrimental to a marriage. I would definitely suggest counseling, getting into a good church with a good pastor who really cares about you and wants to see you succeed, and maybe having accountability in your husband's life. If he continually does that, highly suggest accountability in that situation. So yes, and that is a big missing part of it, I believe, Sarah. She said, I struggled with commitment and being satisfied with my life. I was miserable in marriage until I found God. And a lot of women are miserable until they get saved because they think that the next best thing is going to fill that void. And it's not until they get saved and they realize that God will only fill that void to where they learn contentment and, being committed to make it work. And that is one area I would say going into marriage, you just need to have just the mindset that we're never going to say the divorce word. It's not even on the table. It's not an option. We will work through whatever problem pops up because we have to. And that's kind of always the mindset that I've had is I have to make this work. This is the only one for me. He makes me happy. He has to make me happy because this is it. There is no other alternative. We have to work through whatever problem we're going through. And that's really helped both of us. So Satan will go after marriages because they are the foundation of the home. If the marriage crumbles, the rest of the family has the potential of crumbling. And it is really hard to work through that. I have family members that had multiple children and they went through it. And there was some dark moments during those divorces where it really, really hurt the kids and really affected them and really impacted their life in their teenage years, especially. So just remember that when you make that decision to divorce, it's going to affect a lot of people. It's not just your life when you have kids. When you have kids, you have a lot of people you have to think about. And it's a very selfish mindset to think that, well, I can just get divorced because all that matters is my happiness, And is it really going to bring you happiness, getting divorced and trying to find someone else? Once again, I'm not talking about an abuser type relationship. I'm talking about just an honest to goodness good man. But even in some Christian circles, marriages are a mess, and a lot of it is because the structure of the home has fallen and the right way of the home is not being taught. And you've got married women that want to be career, oriented and neglect the family, not raise the kids. Obviously, that's going to play a huge part in the detriment of the home. But in Christian circles, the divorce rate is almost as high as the world. And that's really sad. I want my generation to change that. I want my generation to go back to longevity of marriages and marriage until death do us part. I want my generation to put their focus back on the family and the home and the marriages. And I'm really praying that my show can be instrumental in helping, homes be healed and marriages be healed, and at least people trying harder, trying to make it work and realizing that divorce isn't an option when it comes to that. So, but yeah, don't ask advice from someone who's miserable in their relationship. And you can tell if the man is miserable and the wife is miserable. Those aren't the type of people I'm going to go to for advice. I'm going to ask advice from people who are happy in their relationship and who have joy in their relationship. And that's what I have. And one thing you'll notice about Jane, excuse me, my friend who I'm having on next week, is that she is one of the most joyful people. And I know she had stressful times raising her kids and growing up, and her husband owns his own business. And now, and I'll let her talk about it a little bit about it next week, but now she's driving him everywhere because of different health things, and right alongside of him as he's working, driving him to the job site and everything. So, she's a trooper. But one thing about Jane is she's always been happy. She's always had a smile on her face. And that's the type, and her and her husband have always been lovey-dovey and just flirting with each other and, giving each other kisses. And I've always looked up to her as someone that I want my marriage to emulate. So I've asked her marriage questions in the past and picked her brain about different situations. And I've tried to go along with the advice that she gave me. So I remember at my bridal shower, she gave a devotional and it stuck with me. And I've been married over 20 years. And she used the hamper illustration, and she was talking about, don't sweat the small stuff. So let's say that your husband has socks and he never makes it in the hamper and they're always on the ground. She's like, well, just don't worry about it. Don't sweat the small stuff. And I just remember her talking about that. And I always tried to keep that in my mind because my husband's not the neatest guy in the world. So I've always tried to keep that in my mind. Anytime I find his clothes on the ground or, anything around the house, I think of that. So, but marriage is a priority. It's one of the main priorities in your life. As a Christian wife and mother, the Bible talks a lot about, how we're supposed to act towards our husbands. He also gives advice to the husbands, but we're not worrying about them. We're worrying about ourselves. And he does talk to the women about how we are supposed to interact with our husbands. And it's one of the most important things in your life, your husband and your kids. So definitely make it a priority, because as the marriage goes, so goes the home. If you have a strong marriage, your kids are going to feel secure. They're not going to feel afraid or worried that, mom and dad are fighting. Mom and dad are they going to get a divorce? Different things like that. So make it a priority. But number 2, raising kids. This is a huge one, obviously, for women that watch my show too. You have questions about raising kids. And raising kids is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I am definitely learning as I go, day by day. My oldest turns 20 this week. So, that's crazy. And I was his age when I had him. Isn't that crazy? I was 20 when I had him. And so he is now the same age I was when I had him, which is crazy to me to think about, because I still see him as my baby. And I'm like, oh, I was such a baby when I had a baby. At 20 years old. I was almost 21. My birthday's next week. So I was a week before I turned 21 that I had him. But hello, Ashley. But yeah, raising kids is definitely the hardest thing I've ever done, but I've watched a lot. And we were, I've been in church pretty much my whole life. I've been in the youth group. I've seen the different paths and things that kids take. And then also, my husband and I were at Lighthouse Baptist Church for 10 years before we started a church. So we got to go through a whole cycle of teenagers, and I got to see how their parents raised them and what worked and what didn't. And I can tell you one thing, the world's way definitely does not work overall. Now, I will say there are certain principles that you can mimic. Take, for example, families around here that are farmers. The farming community I live in rural country. Obviously, I live in the Midwest, so cornfields everywhere, right? Well, the farming community, they raise very hard-working kids. And when my sons detasseled, one of their supervisor guys was a farmer's son. And they worked with a lot of farmers' kids, and they said that the farmers' kids were always the hardworking ones out of the whole bunch. So there are definitely certain principles that you can instill in your kids, even being from a worldly background. And so that's an area where you would take the good principles and you would leave the bad. But in this area, the farming community, they do have a lot of good in it. So as far as producing a good work ethic, there are definitely principles and things that you can learn from. In fact, the lady that I get my raw milk from, I also follow her on Instagram, and I really enjoy seeing her posts, because from the time her kids were born, she's had them working right alongside with her. She's primarily a stay-at-home mom, but she does milk the cows in the morning and the evening. That's her business. It's the milking business. And so her kids are right alongside with her, like shoveling feed, helping her clean out the pens. And so she's also producing kids that have a good work ethic. So I look at that and I try taking advice for my own kids, when it comes to principles like that. So figure out your priorities as a family, and then follow those who are doing or have done a good job with their own kids. I've watched Christian homes, and I've observed the ones that have worked and then those that haven't. I've known a couple homes where the instant their kids turned 18, they were out the door. They wanted nothing to do with church. They wanted nothing to do with God. They didn't carry on what they had been taught. And I took note, and I looked And I made some notes mentally. How did this parent do this? But then on the flip side, over here, the ones that continued on and are now raising their families in church, what did their parents do that were different? Okay. And so I've taken and applied some of those good things to the way I raise kids, but I've abandoned other things that I saw that weren't working. And so one thing that I have seen, so here are the things that are important to me when I'm raising kids. We all have different areas. We all have different priorities. But these are the things that were important to me. Number one, I wanted to raise, obviously, godly kids. So because of that, church has always been a huge, huge priority with us. And Denise, advice for kids getting disinterested in church. It all starts with the parents. I don't really have this problem with my kids. My kids love church. They love being here. They love the people here. And I have never dealt with them not wanting to go or not wanting to be here. In fact, I have to pretty much force them to stay home if they're sick. They're like, no, I don't want to miss church, because they love church so much. So, but it's always been church is our second home. We love church. We are excited about church. We, make it seem exciting for the kids. Even Kelly, yay, we get to go today is a church day. We get to go to a church day. Making it exciting from the time that they were younger is one thing that we have always, implemented in our home. So godly kids obviously is number one. And that is going to take, so my priorities are going to be church, number one. And then, really getting them interested in the Bible, reading the Bible for themselves, being interested in Bible stories, singing songs about God and Jesus. And we try to have a lot of songs playing in our home throughout the day, and I think that helps. But I also wanted to raise kind kids. I don't like bullies. I don't like it when kids bully other kids. So, and you know what? Every kid at one point, don't feel like a failure if you see your kid bullying another kid. Just nip it in the bud. Because every kid is going to test the waters at times, and they're all going to do stuff that you never thought they would. Don't ever say my kid would never do that, because they probably will. Kids have a way of keeping you humble. For sure. The one time I said that in my life, it turned out my kid had done that. So I was very humbled, and I've never uttered those words again since that day, because I learned my lesson. I learned my lesson that day. So I wanted to raise socially aware and not awkward kids. I want to raise kids that are able to interact with other people on a social level, to where they can carry on a conversation. They look people in the eye. They're friendly. They shake people's hands. They know how to carry on conversation and keep it going. I wanted to raise capable kids. I wanted to raise pure kids. I wanted to raise responsible kids that are hard workers. That is a big one to me. And independent thinkers. I want to raise kids that are not afraid to go against the flow of society. And honestly, I really think this whole mess this last 3 years has really, really driven that home for my kids, because they've seen the stand that my husband and I have taken when it comes to certain things, which I can't talk about, which shall remain unnamed on this show, because I don't want to get a strike too. But when it comes to the current topic, just go look up my name and look at my public post, and you'll get an idea of where I stand on this topic. I do believe that there are times to stand, especially against a tyrannical government. And I think it's been good for them to see this. I think, kids follow the example of their parents. And so I really, even for my introverted kids that don't like making waves, I think it's been really good for them to see this. And I now see them taking stands that they didn't at the beginning of this. So it's been a good learning experience. When it comes to the end of days and times, we're going to need kids that are willing to take a stand against the things that the government is trying to implement. So I think this has been a good training ground. But all of those things are hard to implement and get across. But the biggest thing is going to be done through example. So you, as the parent, you set the tone for almost all of these. Your kids see if you're hardworking. Your kids see if you're kind to other people. Your kids see if you're a bully. Your kids, see if you're godly and reading your Bible and going to church. And example is the biggest thing. So what are the things that I've seen that works with raising kids? And then I'll go over some of the things I've seen that doesn't work on the flip side. So the number one thing I have seen that works when it comes to raising kids is consistency. Having consistency in your life. And that is in the form of just getting into a good routine and then having set things. So for us, that would be church, and the things of God come first. So my kids know there's not a question, oh, it's Sunday, are we going to church? That's not even, yes, we're going to church. Even when there's a snowstorm, we're going to find a way to get to church. And we don't expect that for everyone, but that is our family expectation. Okay, that is the way that we have raised our kids. So, is there an activity going on at the church? We're going to be at the church, for the most part. Is there, whatever it is, church and the things of God come first. And then also another thing that works with raising kids is just having balance, not being too liberal in this area, but then not being so over the top in this area. It's all about balance and achieving a good balance when it comes to different things. Another thing is living what you preach. Your kids are going to see if you are a hypocrite or not. They're going to be able to tell if you truly believe in what you're saying or if you're just saying it to put on a show. Your kids will see you at your best and your kids will see you at your worst. Our kids have a way of humbling us. And our kids also have a way of just keeping us humble. If other people think that we're so great, our kids can be like, I can tell you just a story or two. There's one time when mom yelled at me, so yes, kids will absolutely resent it if they see you acting a part, playing a part, but not really believing it, doing something completely different behind closed doors. They're going to see that. They see everything. Another thing is having clear set rules. So don't leave things fuzzy. Don't expect your kid not to lie one day and then the next day it's like, okay, whatever, I don't care, go ahead. Don't say, yep, we're doing school all hardcore today, and then the next day, I'll play video games all day. I don't care. You have to have clear set rules. That's why for us, no, my kids did not get today off of school. They tried making a case for it, and I was like, absolutely not. In fact, my husband almost made them do double goals, because if you research the life of the man whose holiday is named after today, Martin Luther King Jr., he was not a good man. He was a womanizer, and he did some pretty awful things. So we do not observe that day in our home. So, but yeah, having clear set rules, even when it comes to like getting school done, if you're committed to keeping your commitments, whether that's, letting your kids know if you sign up for something, you're following through, whether that's music lessons or I don't know, just something they committed to at church. This is one of my biggest pet peeves. I think it was really, my mom was super picky about this. And this is one of the things, obviously our parents don't do everything perfect, but once again, you can take what they did good with you and apply that to the way that you raise your kids. And then you can just leave the bad if you need to. And one of the things that my mom was super picky about was if I committed to something, I was going to follow through. And I've just always stuck with that. And there's been a few times when I just totally forget, about something that maybe I committed to, and I feel horrible. I feel like the worst person alive because I genuinely forgot about something that I committed to. So, but teach them if they're involved in music at church, teach them to follow through on that commitment, whether that's practices or special events. Let's say they lose their voice the day before. Well, have them get up there and mouth the words watermelon, just have them follow through. If they're in recitals, have them follow through with a performance for recitals. It will teach them a lot about responsibility and accountability, and they're going to need that. if they're boys, when they grow up and they're working a hard job, they're going to need to learn that they've got to just pull through those tough days and follow through on their commitments. So that's a big one, big pet peeve with me. And then, letting the child know how special they are. And that comes back to balance again. You can't be so hardcore that just you're constantly getting after them and constantly yelling at them and constantly correcting them. There has to be genuine love in there, grace, and just letting you know that they're special to you. That every single child, no matter how many you have, you take time to just hug them, tell them they're special, tell them something good about their personality. I really like this about you. I really like that about you. Let them know how special they are. So there are some things that I've seen that do not work when it comes to raising kids. And remember, obviously I've been through 20 years of raising kids, but I've also seen lots and lots and lots and lots of other people that have raised kids, a full generation. And I've seen what works and what doesn't. The ones that tended to walk away from Christianity and moved out as soon as they turned 18, they were like, see ya, moved out of the house, kind of lived their own life, rebelled against everything their parents taught them growing up. This was some of the common things that I've seen. And these are just my observations. There's probably more to it. Maybe some of these aren't in some of the situations. Every kid has to decide for themselves. I have 8 kids. I'm not going to be one of these parents that says my kids, once again, would never do that, because every child has a free will and they have to decide if they're going to serve the Lord. I can't make that decision for them. So I'm just doing the best I can. If I see some area where I'm losing my child or it's not being effective, then I can tweak that and I can change that. And so just watching and observing people that have lost their children to the world as soon as they turned 18, I've tried to do some things in my own life. One of the things I've seen, one of the common denominators is being over the top about things. So whether, I don't know. Okay, let's talk about raising girls with clothes. You can be modest, and then you can be obsessed with modesty to the point that you make everything a sin. Slits and skirts. I knew parents growing up that you were a hussy. If you had a slit in your skirt, even if the slit went below your knee, you were a hussy. Makeup. You were a hussy if you wore makeup. You're a Jezebel if you wore makeup. Earrings. No earrings allowed. Jezebel if you wore earrings. Fingernail polish. Only Jezebels wear fingernail polish. I'm not kidding. I've seen some parents that were this over the top with stuff. Maybe even movies. The one that pops in my mind obviously is Disney movies, but just thinking every Disney movie was demonic and they were going to lose their children to the world if they watched a Disney movie. I don't know. I'm trying to think of some over the top things, but one of the main things I always remembered was the clothing, because I think I am a woman, and a lot of these girls were in our youth group, and I would try to encourage the moms, just maybe need to chill out a little bit. You're being a little over the top about this. They had to wear maxi skirts. They couldn't wear anything that even went below the knee, which for me, my definition of immodesty is basically the top part of the thigh is immodest. So I think that skirts that go below the knee are completely fine and acceptable, and they're modest in every way. So, but yeah, the whole having your ears pierced, fingernail polish, makeup, it's just everything is a sin. So the poor girl couldn't get dressed without, first of all, just getting raked over the coals for choosing the wrong outfit, or sleeveless, sleeveless. You were a hussy if you wore sleeveless, or open backed sandals. Yes, I'm not making this up. There was literally people that had a problem with sandals that had open back. So yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff. So just being completely over the top when it comes to things, maybe like standards or the way you do things in your home, making your kids throw away their stuffed animals because you're afraid it's going to be an idol or something. Just be careful. with being over the top with things. You're gonna raise your kids in a home devoid of joy, and everything turns into a battle, because you're so over the top about every little thing, whether that's stuffed animals or nail polish, or choose your battles wisely. So the ones that I knew that were like this too, their house was a battlefield. Like every little thing in the house was fought over, and the kids hated it. And so why is it any surprise at the age of 18 that they said, see ya, and they walked away? They hated being in their home. It was not a joyful place to be. So be very, very, very careful with being over the top about things. Number two, one of the things I saw a lot was hypocrisy. The parents would come to church, and I would see them talking about, we don't do this in our home. And the kids would be standing there like, are you talking about our home? Yes, we do. So they would put on a big show in church, but yet the kids knew that they did it at home. They'd make a big show about the television shows that they didn't watch, or the sleepovers that they didn't do. And the kids are like, Mom, I just went to a sleepover last week and we watched movies there, So the kids know, they see everything. Don't be a hypocrite. For sure. And then being hardcore in the wrong things. If you're going to be hardcore when it comes to raising kind kids. Be hardcore when it comes to raising kids who tell the truth. Be hardcore when it comes to work ethic. You don't need to focus so much on the little things, on the just like stuffed animals and a cartoon, Cocomelon. You don't need to be hardcore against those things. Just chillax a little bit. Just chillax. So too much harshness, not balanced with enough concern or love. And the ones that I saw that lost their kids, they were extremely harsh. I would cringe sometimes at how I saw them even treating them in front of people. And I have a couple kids who shall remain nameless because they don't like me talking about them in front of people. And they don't, if I even say, whatever this child's name is, like that in front of people, they're mortified. So I have to be really, really careful even how I talk to them in front of people, because to them, that's like the worst kind of rebuke, So kids really pick up on that. You need to be careful with how you talk to your kids in front of other people, or how you interact with them. How, I've seen parents yell at their 17, 18-year-old kid, calling them idiot and stupid and what were you thinking in front of a huge group of people. And I just want to walk away and bury my head in the sand because I feel so sorry for that kid. Kids really, would you want to be yelled at in front of a big group of people and told that you're an idiot and told that you're stupid? If you wouldn't want it, why would you do that to your kid? They're going to remember that the rest of their lives. That's just my opinion. So, yeah, I would be really, really careful how you treated your child in front of other people. But the being hardcore in the wrong things, that is definitely, once again, that comes down to balance and figuring out what your priorities are. Is it really your priority that your child never wears nail polish her entire life? Or is it more of a priority that you raise a kind child? So hopefully that would, that helps when you think about that. Yeah, Chinello, I have a couple that are like that. And then I've got a couple that are just like me, and it takes a little more than that. But I have had a couple where I just give a wrong look, or I just give a mean look, and it straightens them up. Pretty easy kids though, when they're like that. So another thing that I've seen that does not work is flip-flopping around on beliefs. So one day you're throwing out the TV, the next day you're buying the newest plasma. One day you are doing head coverings, the next day you're shaving your head. And lest you think that's extreme, I've seen it happen. I have seen that exact scenario happen. So yeah, one day you're skirts only, the next day you're wearing a bikini to the beach. So you know what? Have some beliefs and stick to it and raise your kids. I've said it before. I've seen liberal families raise better kids than the hardcore, no nail polish. I've seen them raise better kids who are still in church serving the Lord, and they had more liberal beliefs. So I'm not telling you to go liberal. I'm just telling you to find a balance and just stick to that balance, whatever it is. They're going to confuse kids if you're constantly flip-flopping around. Another thing I've noticed is a lot of the ones that tend to walk away, they are raised in very highly critical homes. And I'm talking about people that are highly critical of other people that are highly critical of other Christians, people that are constantly nitpicking. And I believe that type of spirit goes along with a whole hypocrisy type of spirit where it's a show, they're trying to look good. So in order to make themselves feel better, they have to, look at all the faults of others without even looking inwardly at their own faults. So they're highly critical of everyone else, constantly finding fault. Maybe they don't allow nail polish and another family does. And can you believe that family lets their daughters wear nail polish? It's a slippery slope. One day it's nail polish. The next day it's, the bar. It's just the slippery slope fallacy is stupid anyways. But I'm, not kidding. I've seen parents that have used extremes like that. So be careful of being super critical of other people. In the end, we're all just Christians doing our best to raise good kids. So be careful with pointing out the faults of everyone else when we all have faults. None of our families are perfect. We definitely have areas that we can work on. So, just try. This is what I've always told my kids. We do it this way in our family. Does not mean that every other family has to do it this way. That family could do things differently, and that's totally fine. They do what works best for them. So try not to raise highly critical kids. And then trying to raise your kids to make you look good. And I really feel like this was very prevalent in the boomer generation, especially for first generation Christians. And if you were raised in a home like I was, where you had first generation Christians, they tended to be overboard on a lot of things, especially if they went, like my mom did, to seminars like Bill Gothard, crazy hardcore and a lot of weird things. And I think he promoted, I don't know if he promoted the head coverings, but I went to a couple like seminars or conferences he did because my mom took us there, and the lots and lots of head covering people. So I think that's highly encouraged in those circles. Thank goodness my mom never made us do head coverings because I firmly do not believe in those. And I would have had a hard time even as a teen going along with that. So she never bought into all of that. But one thing I noticed at those conferences was it was almost like a competition who had the better kids, and I sensed that, especially for first generation Christians, because they had never really been trained in how to raise children. They really had no idea where to start or, how to have balance. It was just everything's sinful, everything's bad, appearance of evil, get rid of it all, no fun, no joy, and it's a shame because I feel like it raised a lot of kids who just now they want nothing to do with church or God. They just walked away, and maybe they're even still trying to have a relationship with Christ, after salvation, obviously. They're trying to grow closer to him, but they've just rejected everything that reminds them of like hypocrisy and things like that. And that would be church or even the Baptist world, maybe, or anything of that. So I think this definitely goes along with maybe the boomer generation, or maybe it's just first generation Christians in general. But, the whole reason you're trying to raise good kids is so that they can obviously you can bring glory to God, but so that they can go forth and they can raise good children that will benefit society, will bring glory to God, will win other people to Christ. Your whole goal is to raise good kids so that they in turn can raise good kids. And the more good kids you raise, the more people you bring to Christ through that, right? So that's your goal. Your goal isn't for an ego boost or to make you look better, to make you look good. Oh, I got this whole child rearing thing figured out, so everyone will come to me for advice. That shouldn't be the reason that you're trying to raise good kids. So what about having our ears pierced? My husband doesn't want my girls getting it till they're married. He said it symbolizes being a slave. Any thoughts about it? That's hilarious because my husband says the same thing. But notice I have pierced ears. I think he knows. I got them pierced before I was married. I was 12. So what he tells my daughters is that he's going to give them to their husbands without piercings or any holes, any holes there that they self-inflicted. So he said after they're married, it's up to them and their husbands. So that's kind of the rule in our home. But yes, I do have pierced ears. I personally, we kind of differ a little bit on this. This is one area where I've just, it's his daughter's his choice. So I go along with that. That's fine. But the Bible talks about God placing an earring in his bride's ear. So I personally don't think it's wrong because of that. I don't know the exact scripture on that, but I also believe the scripture that says, wives, submit to your husbands. So this is an area that it's his area, you know, with our girls. And we have a couple that want pierced ears, and he just tells them, after you get married, you can do what you want, but it's one of those firm lines for him when it comes to that. So, and then how do I handle your spouse working with other women or him wanting to do a different job that may involve other women, such as being a personal fitness trainer or a physical therapist? That would be tough because I have never faced that. And my husband has worked with other women, but not in a really like close setting. He's pretty much worked factory jobs. If he worked a secular job, it was a factory job with other women that, you know, it's just, they're doing their own thing and it's zipping around. But I do think that Ashley, it's true. Our husbands are going to have to work around women when it comes to things where it's a hands-on. That's a little bit tougher. But I will say, you know, I go to a male chiropractor and it's very professional. He just adjusts me and that's that. So I do think that there are professional outlets. I personally probably wouldn't like it if my husband was touching other women, even in a professional setting, but that's something that, you know, you're both going to have to talk about and come to an agreement. And hopefully he will, you know, respect your decision or respect your wishes. And, you know, I feel like you both need to be comfortable with it. So I don't know, that's hard. If any other ladies have advice, you know, I've never faced that. So I don't know what I would do in that situation. I think I would be uncomfortable with it for sure. And so maybe that's something where I think with my husband, he would know I would be uncomfortable. So he would just never pursue that type of job, if that makes sense. So I think that has to definitely be something that you and your husband work out as a team. So for sure. Okay, but then let's go back to topic. So yes, another thing I've seen that does not work is using your kids and family as the perfect example of how everyone should do it. Comparing yourself with other people, you know, comparing yourself with other families. Look at my family. My family is the role model. I would personally not do that. And I tell my church, don't put me on a pedestal. And all the ladies that are my friends know that my kids mess up, know that my kids sin. There's no perfect family. All kids are sinners. And, you know, we're just all in this thing together and we're all growing. So I'm constantly learning new things. I raise my kids differently now than I did 20 years ago. So I've learned a lot along the way and I'm constantly tweaking it. And you know, we all have faults. We all have failures. And my kids are not perfect by any means. I'm not the perfect mom. My husband is not the perfect husband, but we are human trying to do our best to serve the Lord. And so we just muddle through day after day and try to get better, you know, at what we do. Probably not, Sarah, for sure. So I'm almost done. But another area that I have made judgment in is how I need to live my life. And this started early from the time I was saved, all the way through being a kid, all the way through my teenage years. I've always been pretty opinionated and pretty strong-willed. Haha, very funny, Chanello. And I have always kind of gone against the current flow of society and how I do things. And these are just looking at other people and their lives and how they turned out. I took note of things And so a few of the things that I took note of is living a life for self versus living a life for others. Since the time that I saw my first missions conference when I was probably 6 or 7, I can still remember sitting there watching all the kids come down the aisle holding flags for different countries. And I told my mom that night, I said, I want to do that. Meaning, I wanted to give my life to serve the Lord in whatever capacity that is, whether that was a missionary, whether that was a pastor's wife, from the time I was little. And I've heard some preachers preach against that, but I see nothing wrong with that. I see nothing wrong with men growing up and wanting to be a pastor. My husband did. I see nothing wrong with men growing up and wanting to be a missionary. And I see nothing wrong with women wanting to be married to those men. And that's what I wanted from the time I was little. And because of that, I saw that I would have to live a pure life versus living any way I want to. If my intention was to marry someone going to the ministry, I knew I couldn't just live this wild, crazy life. I knew that I would need to be sober and pure if I wanted a sober and pure guy. If I expected that, then I expected myself to live that way too. Realizing that my relationship with Christ was first and foremost, and that was going to be the thing that kept me on the straight and narrow path. So I watched people my age. I watched the paths that they went down. I watched those that went down the path of drinking and drugs, and I saw the way that their lives ended up. I watched those that went down the path of seeking self-fulfillment, and I see now, after 2 or 3 divorces and them on drugs just to cope and get through the day, and their depression and their anxiety, I see all that and I take note of it. I watched when it came to ethics and integrity and how I ran my life, whether that was being honest or not being honest. Even when it came to financial matters, when my husband and I, when he started the church, from day one, he was very, very careful with money things. And he had checks and balances from day one. From day one, even though it was just our family that started, we had some help from Lighthouse that came. So he had 2 men count the offering and put down what was, at the beginning, it was like $100 offerings. So obviously we had very little when we started, but he still wanted that accountability in place. So from day one, he's always had, two men at least count the offering. He's always had a paper trail. He's never done anything with cash. He has paper trails all the way up for the past 10 years. Now he has even more checks and balances in place than he did when we first started, because as we've grown and more responsibility happens, then he puts more and more responsibility in place. So because we've seen what happens, he was in the ministry his whole life. He saw what would happen when people were bad with finances. Or, he's seen a lot of pastors that have skimmed off the top. He's seen a lot of pastors that got into financial debacles. So he didn't want that for our church. So once again, we judged and we observed and we put into practice safeguards in our own life. Another safeguard that we've always done since we've been married is my husband doesn't counsel women alone. My husband doesn't go places with women alone. Anytime he's had to counsel a woman here, I have been here. And he's never been alone with a woman. Another thing that we just did for accountability in our church was we had the guys put glass windows in all of the doors. And so there's huge glass windows in any door, of just even his office. And that's just, he doesn't think he would ever do anything, but it's just extra accountability. So it's always good to have the accountability in your life when it comes to these things, because we've seen everything in the ministry. When it comes to the ministry, we've seen things happen. We've seen pastors fall because of financial scandal. We've seen pastors fall because of immorality. We've seen pastors fall because of infidelity. We've seen pastors fall because of even just accusations or something looking bad, emotional affairs. We've seen everything. So because of that, we've observed and we've tried to put safeguards in our own life. But then even how I dress, I'm going to wrap it up. But even how I dress, I've seen the world's way and I've seen the biblical way. And I've seen the different paths that those take. Even when it comes to things in churches, like we've noticed with most churches, once they get rid of the King James Bible, their music, usually it's music is the first to go, then it's the King James Bible, then it's dress, then it's like all these things go hand in hand. So that's one of the reasons that we've tried to always keep the high standards when it comes to those different areas in our, even the church, because it always seems to have a ripple effect. And I've seen that too when it comes to dress. People that I knew that were raised the same way as me, they suddenly decide that certain verses in the Bible don't apply to them. And, you know, we're in the 21st century, so we can dress the way the world dresses. And so usually if they were skirts only, the skirts go. So then they're in jeans. Well, then it's piercings, lots of piercings, not just the one. It's up the ear. It's a nose piercing usually first. Then it's the tattoos. And they start getting tattoos. Lots of Christians I knew my age, that's one of the things that goes after dress is the tattoos. And once again, it's kind of like the slippery slope thing. You know, I'm not saying that everyone, it's stupid to say that if you give this up, you're going down the path to getting a tattoo. I'm not saying that at all. But I've just noticed a progression with people usually, you know, once they start giving up those things. So for me, I have just a couple boundaries, a couple guidelines set in my life that I don't ever want to give up or cross, because I don't want that to happen to me. Excuse me. I have something in my throat. Sorry. And just for me personally. So I would say, even if it's just, you know, even if it's not skirts all the time, you need to come up with your standard in your own life and then just put that in place and have some lines that you won't cross when it comes to that. You know, have certain things that you will not do, even if it's a different standard than me, which is totally fine. So, but those are just some of the things. I also had a note in here, just like I've seen, like even how I conduct myself in public, even when it comes to watching and observing social interactions, whether that comes to other women or friends or, you know, couples or whatever, work ethic. I try to always have a really strong work ethic. If I've ever worked a secular job, which I haven't worked many, I've pretty much been raising kids, but I did work at an arts academy for a few years until I started my own piano academy, which has just exploded. So I'm going to stick with that. But with my work ethic, I always tried to make sure that, because people knew I was a Christian, I had a lot of questions because of the way I dressed and things, and that would open up a lot of conversation, which was good. But because of that, I felt like I really needed to be a good example when it came to being on time and going above and beyond what I needed to do. And I had a really good reputation there when it came to my work ethic and the way I conducted myself and stuff. And I always thought of it as I am an ambassador for Christ. So I want them to be able to see Christ through me. And so I'm going to try to live my life in a way that they can see that. And that's how I try to conduct myself anywhere I'm at, even if I'm in public, the way I interact with people, you know, authority figures, the police, which I haven't had any interactions with the police, but, you know, just airport security or someone telling me to put on a mask or just something stupid like that. You know, I try to remain firm but pleasant if I have to deal with any type of altercation. You know, I need to be an example. Obviously, they're going to be able to tell that I'm different, especially if I'm with my kids and all of us are in our skirts and everything. So I need to have a good testimony when it comes to interactions with the public. So those are just some things that I have done in my life. If you guys think of anything else, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. You know, maybe tell me an area where you've made judgment calls. And I didn't even go over any of the things like family things with extended family. And there's so much that you could talk about with this subject. Just being an observer of other people's lives and taking what you learn through observing and applying it to your own life. And I would highly recommend maybe every day, reading a different Proverbs. You know, there's 31 Proverbs, which is cool because, or 31 books. So it kind of lines up to the days of the month. And we can always glean wisdom from Proverbs. There's so much wisdom in Proverbs. And once again, Proverbs are something that we can pattern our life after, but they're not necessarily commands. Otherwise, there would be contradictions when it comes to some of those principles, such as answer not a fool, and then it tells you in the next verse to answer a fool. So discernment is always needed when using some of these things in Proverbs, but great book. Listen to the sermon. I'll link to it below. It was a good sermon called Being a Wise Observer. I tried to get him to come on with me tonight, but he was like, no, he didn't feel like it. I think he was going to go run for an hour or something. So he's probably done now. But anyways, that is it for tonight. Definitely tune in next week. I am super, super excited about next week. I hope that Miss Jane will be a help to you guys. She's a great example, and she's raised great kids and raised a great family, and they have a great marriage. And they are the type of family every pastor and his wife wants in their church, because they're just faithful and consistent. You always know they're going to be in their spot. They had the same spot year after year after year, and they're probably still sitting there right up in the front, front row Baptists. So they're just the type of people that everyone wants in their church. So I hope you guys will tune in next week. Thanks for joining, and we will see you guys next week. All right.